And there's like a continuum of experience that says, okay, this feels like home too. I'm not kind of spending my life longing for home that is on another planet somewhere. Yeah. There is a coming home when water is part of the picture of being born.
Hello and welcome to Healing Trauma Mamas. I'm your host, Madon Wingo. Thank you for joining us as we share in our stories and experiences of healing from childhood traumas and birth traumas. Listen as we discuss our struggles, our failures, our strengths and our victories, and all those lessons we've learned along the way. Why, hello, Healing Trauma Mamas. Welcome back to the podcast. I know we took a little break through the month of April, but we are back for our second year of the Healing Trauma Mamas podcast. And I am so thrilled today to have a very special guest on the podcast coming from a long way, but we're so thankful for technology that we can be able to meet together and record this, what I know to be a wonderful podcast today for you all. And we're going to kind of delve into some different things that we haven't really talked about on the podcast yet. We've just barely really got our toe in the water, and and that'll just lead into more of what we're going to talk about today. But I'd like to welcome my guest, Sophia, to the podcast.
Hello, and thank you so much. Hello to all your listeners. And Madon, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what I do all the way here in Corfu, Greece, which is very far, but here we are talking about water, I believe.
Yes. I'm very excited to talk about water. And I think it's so neat how we actually kind of got connected to get you on the podcast. Actually, I have a close friend of mine who was a teacher of mine in midwifery school, and then we've become friends. And she took a trip last year out there to see you and see the work you're doing, and I'm enjoy an amazing time in Greece. And
Yes.
she shared with me, she knew about the podcast and said, you really should talk with Sophia and the amazing work she is doing with water and how that pertains to trauma and birth work and all of it. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. So I'm just so thrilled to have you here, and I'm just ready to dive in, so to say.
Dive in.
So could you maybe give us just a little bit of history, just a little introduction about, who you are and how you got to where you are right now?
Absolutely. So I guess growing up on an island, water was part of childhood. It was part of growing up. It is my happy space, let's say. And over the years, I realized that I wanted water to be part of my life and part of what I do. And so about 15 years ago, I decided I want to support pregnant women, pregnant families in water. So off I went. I went into a warm pool, kind of thinking that I'm going to be shown how to float people and how to do what water does beautifully. And what I didn't expect during that first week of, 20, 50, 70 hours underwater was that my own birth stories started to come to the surface.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I started becoming aware of certain things that were already in me. There were physical sensations. There were like déjà vus, sensations, emotions that just surfaced. And it's like, oh, wow, where did that come from? But at the same time, a bigger part of me started to make sense. It had such a big impact on me because I was already on a journey of, let's say, a holistic journey of remembering myself, of healing myself. So this was the deepest I had ever gone. So for me, it's like, okay, warm water is my thing, and I'm going to dedicate my path to that. And over the past 10 years, I've kind of pieced together my birth story, which I have a podcast for. It's called Sophia's Birth Story. And it really, what I'm sharing is not just my story, or how through my story I began to see birth from a baby's perspective. It's like, oh wow, if I'm remembering this, this is how being in the womb must feel like. Or this might be some of the first, let's say, recordings or impressions or impacts that life has on us while swimming in amniotic fluid, right? Which is a liquid and fluid container. And so I started to look at what are some of the important milestones of even preconception, conception, through pregnancy. I support water birth as a doula. And then I also support babies in a kind of, I call it a healing bath that helps them integrate their birth. And then the first years in water, like baby swimming, preschool swimming. So I guess over time, I've created a continuum of experience for babies coming into this world from conception up to the first few years of life. And what I'm seeing is that the babies that are supported by water during this transition into life are more present, are more aware, are more embodied, more connected, and life doesn't feel so out of place somehow. Yeah.
Wow, that's
so
wonderful.
That's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting because something that we have talked on this podcast about many, many times before is the body keeps the score is how we refer to it usually. And that's also the name of a book, a title of a book that I've read and I've talked about before. And it really talks about how our body stores experiences that we've had, not just in our memory, but in our cells, all throughout our body, and how those things may come up at times that we have no clue where it came from, why it's coming there, why these emotions are coming out in this specific moment. And I think it's really interesting because what we haven't really delved into is going back as far as before infancy. And we've talked about in our childhood and different things that have happened to us, happy or traumatic events that have happened throughout our childhood and how that affects us as adults. But we really haven't got into in the womb or in infancy and those events that happen to us then and how those affect us later on in life and throughout our whole just living and being, and how these things can come up. Like you said, you were like, where is that coming from? I don't even know. I don't recognize, what's going on here, and how amazing that is that you're delving into that. And this is not the first time I've heard of this. I've actually was part of a psychological midwifery study they were doing recently, and they were talking about the guest speaker was talking about this exact thing, about how everything going on in the womb affects the infant just as much as it would affect us now to have a very heightened experience like birth and like being connected to your mother in the way that you are in the womb. So I'm thankful to start hearing some of this stuff out and about going on. And I love that you have already been doing this for 10 years, you said?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, my own process has been 10 years. What I'm surprised in a way is how quickly people are resonating with the work. I have women, particularly from Central Europe, actually coming to Corfu to prepare. And this is what's exciting me. It's like, even if you don't get to have your water birth, you can come and prepare in the water, and that is already connecting you more deeply to your baby, is connecting your baby more deeply to you and to the life that he or she is coming into. Even if, you birth in the hospital, or your birth turns out different to how you wanted it to go, but the preparation has been in water. And it doesn't even mean that, you need expensive equipment or a pool. You can even prepare in a birthing pool. You can prepare in a bathtub. It's a lot simpler than it sounds. However, it is recognizing, and it's exactly what you said, Madon, that we forget that we were actually born. And those first 9 months get recorded in our cells, in our flesh while developing in the womb. At the beginning, we're just fluid that over time becomes our bones and our teeth and denser material, let's say, but everything gets recorded. And so the way we experienced our being born will impact the way we give birth. Yeah. It's a continuum that we think before and after birth, and more science is showing as well that babies are actually experiencing a lot more in the womb than we ever imagined. Perhaps it's even too painful sometimes to remember some of these things because of the vulnerability of that stage of our life.
So I think it's interesting as well that we've talked before. You're bringing up how important water is and how beneficial for this whole process it is, and how that's really where we start. We start in fluid, in water, and I think it's interesting that our cells, the individual cells themselves, are 80% water. And when science is really starting to see, what's going on with those cells. And one of the studies that I've looked at in the last 6 months or so has been about how cells hold memory. And that's because the water holds memory. And if we are 80% water, how many memories are being stored in our cells? And that kind of stretches you, because we've been taught for so long that, our memory is just stored in our brain. But our cells hold memory. Every single cell that we have holds memory of different events that we have had happen in our lifetime. And we started in water. And I just think that's just so amazing, just to think about like how important that water, that substance, is just to our being.
Absolutely. And I think if we try and get it logically, it's almost too big for our brain to contain. It's like, how big is a galaxy? But when we start looking at ourselves from the inside out, which is what happened with me, and kind of looking at, this is how it must have felt in uterus, and this is baby experiencing the fluid environment of his own container, let's say, it becomes very multidimensional. And the first language that let's say we speak in it as an embryo, as we are coming into form, is vibration. Everything starts getting imprinted, and you see it in water. Water resonates with the most subtle forms of energy. Even thought will impact water. So there's sensitivity to water in the same way that there's a sensitivity there in the embryo, and there's touch. The way water touches you creates this sort of multi-sensory experience of feeling and sensation, and that's true for us as adults, but it's also true as this developing embryo. So remembering all these layers of awareness and not focusing on just the logical part that we're taught is the most important. We are able to meet babies and children more fully. It's like saying, I see all of you, by recognizing how multidimensional we are, and how sensitive we all are, and allowing space for that sensitivity and time, and recognizing we all have our individual rhythm, which I think is the first thing that gets interrupted when we start interfering with being born. So we have all these babies kind of born out of their timeline, because for many reasons that happens. So water helps us kind of make sure that we're being born in our own time, and allows us. There's this allowing that happens in water. It allows us to sort of surface when we are ready. Water doesn't push. You don't push a birth to happen. It kind of, and this is mamas that come to the water. There's this trusting life, trusting the fluid nature of life, to kind of, what if I surrender to that? What if I surrender to the waves that are passing through me, that are bringing my baby closer to me? So water works on so many levels. No matter how deep you want to go, water is going to meet you there. Physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. In fact, there's this ancient Greek philosopher who, I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyway, we're talking 400 BC. And for him, everything at the beginning, before we are born, is one water. It's just like one stream of consciousness where we're all unified. And for whatever reason, we become one drop of water. We become this individual drop of water that is unique. That's me, that's you. And then we kind of forget that we were one water. There's a longing. Our soul remembers we are one water. So we're all kind of wishing for that sense of connection. But there's also a very individual experience to be had. Sometimes we experience that as loneliness. But being in the water reconnects us to that sense of oneness. In fact, there is only one water. Since the beginning of time, since water appeared on this planet, it's the same amount of water being regenerated over and over again, and transforming from ice to fluid, to evaporation, to the whole life cycle is constant. It's a continuum.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So in your work that you're doing, you're helping mothers prepare for their labor and for that birth process. Would you like to walk us kind of through what that looks like a little bit?
That's a good point. I actually, what I'm inviting, both in men and women, is actually to prepare before conception.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because let's say the sperm, which is actually fluid, that will become a conceived sperm, actually gets released or start preparing about 3 months before actual conception. The one that will be used starts being prepared 3 months before conception. So imagine, if we're talking sperm that's fluid, what's the quality of that sperm when we were talking about water and the quality of the water? And the same with a future mother. If the womb that's going to contain that fluid, what's the quality, what's the vibration, what's the ecology of that womb? And are both parents prepared to look at their birth experience, so they're not necessarily repeating some of those patterns that get passed down very often from generation to generation?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. If you really start with them and, with the couple and looking at their previous experiences, do they have any trauma that needs to be worked through? Do they have they even looked at their birth experience and where they're coming from, both of them, before they then, bring forth life themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, look, at this part of this dreaming and my vision that I've dedicated myself to, I really want to work with people that are ready to do the work, that want to do the work, and I feel many people are called by the water because there's a familiarity, there's something deep inside them that feels touched. So it's like, okay, are you ready to make changes? Are you ready to prepare yourselves for the next generation of children that are coming in, that want a full conscious yes? Yeah, when you find out you're pregnant, of course, there's always an element of surprise. But how about that first yes? being a full conscious yes. Because from my experience, from a baby's perspective, that first yes gets recorded in the system. Yeah.
Yep.
And it coincides the moment a woman has skipped her period and realizes she's pregnant, probably around 4 weeks in, yeah, you're missing a period, and it's like, oh, I might be pregnant. That's exactly the time when a conceived embryo, the heart starts to beat at 4 weeks. So imagine your heartbeat. Somebody says, yeah, yes to you fully, or actually I'm not quite sure, or I'm going to hide this fact for a few weeks. Yeah, that's the first trauma, and nobody really wants to hurt anyone here, but it's most trauma arises out of a lack of presence and awareness rather than intentional harm.
Right. And not realizing how deeply important our thoughts and our words are. It you don't realize how far that's going to carry. And I just had a really great conversation with a very dear friend of mine, Caitlin Fusco, over at the Happy Home Birth podcast. And we were discussing how a mother feels and speaks and responds in her pregnancy, how all of that is affecting that child. And we don't even think, I mean, it's kind of out of our realm of consciousness that we're even thinking about that this is affecting that child at that moment, and the way we feel. And now you taking it to like those vibrations going through that water, those thoughts being carried through to the baby, those words of yes or yay, excitement that we're having a little one, or oh no, what are we going to do? We're having a little one, right? Two very different responses, and those are going to affect that little one tremendously.
And that's already, let's say, the first part of preparation, which can take place on land through verbal communication. And wow, if people are here and have a chance to come to the water with me, then already that preparation becomes more embodied, which means you're also having a physical experience of remembering, and the body starts to soften and open up to receive physically and emotionally this life that's coming in, right? So how receptive, how welcome do you feel into this life? We've chosen to come on some level, as a on a soul level. We chose to be here. We chose our parents. We are part of that equation. So let's say we've chosen, and how welcome do we feel? And during the pregnancy, how connected is my mama to her body, to her sense of self? How deeply is she really listening to her needs? Because that listening impacts baby here and now. Imagine that a mother's heartbeat transmits pulses, even a sound, through the fluid of the amniotic sac. So let's say a fast heartbeat, an anxious heartbeat is telling baby, mommy's scared. Why is mommy scared? Is it safe for me to be here? Is this a safe container? I'm not even talking about what mommy's eating. I'm talking about how fast, how deep is her breathing? What's the quality of her thoughts? And of course, it's not about living a Zen life. It's hard to live a Zen life, but I don't think babies want us to be perfect. Just being authentic and honest with where we are.
Right, because all things, there's lots of things that get thrown our way that we have absolutely no control over. But how we respond to those situations is so important. And I love you talking about doing the work beforehand, because a lot of that is changing the way we think. changing the way we respond to situations and understanding the importance of those words and those thoughts, not only for a little one that maybe not even be conceived yet, but for ourselves.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm curious
And
if you've done a lot of, or I don't know if a lot is the right word, but how you've worked, say a couple coming to you, um, they still have to work on that work because they're dealing with maybe maybe they weren't wanted. Maybe they
yeah.
had a very traumatic entrance into the world and struggled. How, what's some of the processes that you go through with them to kind of help them reconcile that and then go forward?
That's a good question, hon. I mean, not everyone is immersed hours underwater. I mean, I want to make that clear. Um, and I do work online, so it is verbal. And I think what I bring into the space is this awareness within ourselves, yeah, which is soft and it's gentle. There's rarely pushing and shoving. It's not forcing people to go into a space that they're not ready to. But when we welcome that, when we hold space for that, usually the emotions that we carry inside us, we might have been ignoring, do come to the surface. So yes, there can be grief very often, is a deep emotion that we don't often recognize is in there. Grief of not being welcomed. Grief of even a miscarriage of our own, or even of our mothers or our grandmothers. And I think the most important thing to say here is compassion. Really compassion for ourselves, becoming witness to those vulnerable parts of us that make us somehow more human. So there's no space for judgment, but really allowing and sitting with that. And I, most of the time, just witnessing it, just bringing it to the surface, bringing it to light, and having a compassionate witness that is either myself or the partner, then it settles. It's no longer a trigger, but it becomes part of who we are in acceptance of more parts of us. And it doesn't mean that we need to sort of bring everything up. But what is usually there's 2-3 things that just lie on the surface that get repeated over and over, and we kind of know that part of ourselves. It's a pattern, it's a recognizable pattern. It's like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. And it brings up an intimacy, a deep intimacy with oneself and with the partner. And then we turn that into curiosity, which is also a very childlike, natural curiosity of, oh, if I go there, if I go into this part of myself, what does that look like? And these are, at the same time, these are all fundamental skills of getting to know your future baby. Rather than presuming to know who they are, it's like, oh, who are you? You know, what touches you? Where is your, where do you feel vulnerable? So sort of becoming nurturing parents towards ourselves. So at the same time as working with yourself, you're also developing the skills to receive your baby. And a sort of very important part of this process is, okay, it's about a few months in after conception, and then you're going to find out that it's a boy or a girl. How do you feel about being a woman in your life? How do you feel about being a man? Because if being a woman wasn't really safe in your life or was tough, well, how about changing that paradigm or that awareness of yourself for your baby girl?
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot. And we haven't even got to becoming ready to come out yet. We haven't even got to
Right.
the birth yet. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about, but so important.
And this is why I appreciate also Jenny reaching out and connecting us and talking about this stuff. It's the layers are infinite, I would say, of discovering who we are and the depths of who we are. But why I really feel this work is important now is that the generations that are coming are going to need all the resources they can get to be as empowered, as embodied as they can be from the very beginning, to be able to live life on this planet that is changing rapidly and is not necessarily is not a green paradise anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I want to say that not to scare people, but there is an urgency. You know, what are we bringing our babies up in clean, natural environments? How can they be as resourced from the very beginning to become who they are, not who we want them to be? They have the keys, they have the knowledge, they have the resources for, you know, solutions in the future. So, you know, how do we birth them in a way that is sort of birthing conscious humans, so to speak?
Yeah, I love that.
And I think most of we need to make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
They're already ready, so to speak.
Well, it starts with understanding who we are itself,
Yeah.
and me doing that hard work to get to the bottom of who I am, who was I created to be, what am I bringing to the table, and getting rid of those things I know that have become those habits or those thought patterns that are not benefiting me currently and definitely will not benefit a child.
There's something about the water, and I say this also to mamas out there and to papas, adults. You know, very often what we're all missing is this big, unconditional, loving mama that's just going to hold us for a couple of hours, and we can just deeply rest in her arms and receive unconditional love, that we can be really accepted fully for who we are, and we can recharge, you know, not have to worry just for an hour, you know. And for me, that's water. The warmth of water just allows you to rest so deeply and recharge and resource and connect the missing links very often on your own. You know, if we take the time and space, we can usually connect to the wisdom that's inside of us. And that's enough to kind of come back out of the water and feel, okay, I've got this. I know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's really an empowerment for parents here to even the hardest stories or the most difficult stories we carry can find acceptance, can find a way through in water to something new, to something fresh, to a next part of us that perhaps doesn't feel alone or a victim or not enough somehow.
Well, as you were talking about that too, I was thinking about how I live in West Texas. So
Wow.
water here, right now everybody's praying for rain. Please bring us rain, because we've been so dry, and we just came off of a year that was very, very dry. And how refreshing, and it's such a renewal when we get some fresh rain, or when we're able, our lakes get full and we're actually able to go, to the lake, and get to experience water. I was just thinking, for those of us who don't, we don't live in Greece and don't get to have
Yes,
water
very true.
right there, just how much we long for it, and we don't even realize we're longing for it.
Yes, good point. And one of the things that dehydrates us without realizing is computer screens and phone screens.
Mm-hmm.
They interact with our eyes. It's like, if you stare at a screen for too long, your eyes go dry. That's actually drying up our nervous systems. So it's not just about being in water. It's about drinking. It's not even about drinking enough water. It's about drinking water consciously. It's about charging your water in the sunlight, making sure you're drinking good water. Yeah. It's about taking a foot bath. I mean, even just imagining that you're putting your feet in warm water with some Epsom salts, there's an immediate kind of, the whole system kind of relaxed just by thinking about it, let alone just putting your feet in water. So it's not like needing endless streams of water. And then take aloe vera, yeah, or crushed chia seeds. There's like plasma, there's like a fluidity, a fluid something in the aloe vera. Imagine putting that on your lips. There's a sort of succulence that comes back, an aliveness that comes back to the lips or the skin. And that's hydrated. And this is the kind of quality we're looking for at conception, so that our eggs, our uterus is juicy. And that also comes from the quality of our food, the quality of the fluid in our food. So it's not just about being immersed in water. It's, in fact, I call it supporting pregnancy and birth with water, or supporting life with water, as a continuum, as a whole experience. And then, preparing for actual birth. We do, and I'm sure, and this is how I connected with Jenny. I mean, she has probably one of the highest water birth rates of anyone I know. So, I mean, talking to Jenny as well about her experience of water birth. And yes, I became a doula because I was already serving preparation, and I was serving babies and children post-birth, and I couldn't be present at the birth. And it was like, I really want the whole continuum here. So I became a doula to be able to be present at birth. And I never thought I would be doing out of hospital births on a small island in Greece during a pandemic. It's like, wow, life really wants this to happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that when you were talking about so many other things that provide that rejuvenation because of the water that's in it. I was just thinking about that. Like, that's what water does for us, or the moisture does for us. It's like, it's rejuvenation and rest.
And cleansing, and detoxing layers of stuff. So yes, it can simulate that womb-like environment. So being immersed in a container of water that's 35 degrees simulates a womb-like environment for sure. And that's part of the story. But then as a pregnant person, there's all these other ways that you can support your pregnancy naturally with water, which is, without water, there isn't life in the first place. And the fascinating thing I find, especially people that coming to the pool, let's say there's this, every birth somehow holds trauma in it. It's an intense experience physically, if anything else. And people come out of deep processes in the pool, and then they find themselves in this beautiful warm water pool surrounded by beauty and flowers, and at the end you're in pleasure. And pleasure is something that we kind of leave out of our lives, or we almost think it's a sin to have pleasure, right? But I'm just going to show you something. We're talking about vibration at the beginning, and there's what happens when you're eating a juicy mango, right? Or juicy watermelon. There's this sound of pleasure and yumminess, right? So imagine you're a mom and you're pregnant and you're going, that sound is sending vibrations to your baby. That life is good.
Nice.
You know, there's pleasure here. Yeah. And, oh, I'm looking at beauty. My eyes are not looking at the screen. They're like looking at flowers on the trees, and just looking at water drops your heart rate. You know, you're telling your baby that you're coming into a world that's safe, not overheating. Yeah.
Well, and then those thoughts that you have during that time is of peace and thankfulness, right? When you're looking at that body of water, or when you're eating that watermelon or mango, like along with the vibrations that you're making, and the sounds that you're making, the thoughts that you're having is, oh, I'm so thankful. This is so good. You know, I'm enjoying this so much. And all of those are going to your baby as well.
Yeah. So for sure, it's a way to address, you know, some of let's say the difficult or the challenging parts that we all contain. Yeah. But it's also a way of creating something, of choosing to create a different container for that are coming. And for moms to be held in and be rested and resourced themselves to continue to be resourced mamas, you know, and baby swimming, if I'm allowed to post. Yeah, baby swimming was my first passion, not knowing that at some point all of this was going to be connected, creating a continuum. And you see that the same way an embryo kind of can move in water in 360 degrees, it's that movement that water allows, this multidimensional movement, that actually develops synapses in the brain. So a baby that comes to the water for baby swimming will move more freely than on land. So science shows that children that come to baby swimming classes do better at school because their brain has developed more fully. They have developed more embodied movement, more free movement, rather than being quite static. And of course, you need gravity to develop, and we need tummy time on land, etc., etc. But it's almost as if water is here to help us transition into this life more gently. Yeah. That this transition of birth isn't as abrupt or disconnected. And there's like a continuum of experience that says, okay, this feels like home too. I'm not kind of spending my life longing for home that is on another planet somewhere. Yeah. So there is a coming home when water is part of the picture of being born.
Well, it's such a lovely picture and thought, just listening to you talk about it. It just brings up such restful and peaceful and pleasurable, just even thoughts, just about what that does for us and what that does for a little one. And I just love it.
Thank you. Yeah, and what you're feeling, and I think, and people, the way you talk about water, for me, it comes from being in the water. You know, water transforms you. Water meditates you, and if it's doing that for me, it's doing that for baby also. And it's amazing to see babies that come out of a water birth. It's like they don't cry very much.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's such a sense of peace and connection there and presence. And it's the moment we enter the water, we are more present. We are more here and now. You're not going to go into a swimming pool with your phone. It
That's right.
invites you. Yeah, you're here and now when you're in the water, and your baby needs you to be here and now. And if I can say one last thing, most of the time, the reason we have difficulty in stopping and sitting still is because there's unresolved pre-birth trauma. Because sitting still means that I'm ready to face whatever it is that's there, that shows up in the silence.
Yeah, I think I think that's something that our society struggles with tremendously, is being able to sit still and to be with our thoughts. And we're in such a culture of distraction and busyness, that learning to be able to sit still with those and be able to work through them, even when they are, bringing up things that are not pleasant to us, but learning how to work through those, because like you said, of maybe our experiences when we were born, it's a difficult thing that we're not taught how to do well.
There is, and I think during the pandemic, we collectively faced even the fear of extinction, if I'm going to be extreme about it. But I think people faced, oh my God, what if I get sick? What, how serious is this, etc., etc. When we, let's say, start remembering being born, there's always the possibility that we don't make it. In fact, it's a miracle we're here in the first place. We've all made it. We're here. But a baby that's coming into this life is having all these experiences, but baby doesn't really know if he's coming or going. It's like, am I being born or am I dying here? It's scary stuff. And that's an anxiety that somehow we all carry in us. And that door of coming or going is a very thin veil. And to be able to talk about it without panicking or feeling scared about it. And I think, midwives are that's why midwives are so wise, because, the whole space for birth and all the possibilities that come with it. I'm not scared.
Well, I always feel like we're in the balance, and
Yeah.
we don't necessarily know which way it's going to go. But yes, holding that space and being, there, it is a miracle every single time. And I was thinking about the water that you were talking about, like even for those who, don't have a water birth. I think it's interesting that, something that is done a lot, I know here in the States with midwives, is offering an herbal bath for the mom and baby afterwards, and just letting them rest in that herbal bath. I mean, it's herbs that are steeped and then put in the water. And how whenever you put that newborn in there with the mama, almost every single time, you can watch that baby's muscles all just suddenly relax, and it floats in the water. And it is the most content that you have ever seen a newborn.
Absolutely. And it's so deeply touching, and I think that's where the recognition comes. It's like, oh, I remember that in me. There's a longing there of perhaps returning to that sense of innocence and purity that is part of this newborn condition. And also, the baths, the opportunities for being in water. It's not about washing your baby. For the first few weeks, I don't think babies need to be washed, but coming to the water is something sacred that is really helping babies get used to having a body, get used to gravity. Because let's say our spirit remembers itself, but it's kind of getting used to living in a container. And that can be a little bit tricky at the beginning because it's heavier for sure. Yeah, it's like, oh, how do I get used to this? How do I move this body? And water is almost like this softener that helps life become, a little bit more soft, a little bit more soft, a little bit more fluid. Yeah, it eases that transition into physical form. Yeah, let's see.
I love it. I just was the word healing just keeps coming through my mind right now. Just thinking of all those healing properties, not only for a little one, but for adults, as well as how healing the water is, and ways that we can incorporate that more into our daily or weekly routines to be able to just shut all those other things off, put it aside, and really rejuvenate and heal. And just I'm thinking of like listening and truly resting into the water and letting yourself let go
And
in that space.
I think it's really treating water as something sacred, especially in parts of the world where water is scarce. And when you do get in water, it's like, this is so precious. And really, and water connects, water feels us, water communicates. So if you do find yourself in, a bath of water, it's like, wow, realizing how precious this is. And water, clean, pure water on this planet is becoming more and more precious. Yeah.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, Sophia. I know a lot for the listeners to really digest. I'd encourage you to maybe even rewind and go listen again, because there's so many nuggets of just information that I know can benefit every single one of us, currently, and any future little ones that you might bring into the world, those listening. And I just want to encourage you to kind of just dive into that a little bit more. Really look at our own feelings and thoughts, and like I said, how we are made up of water and how we long for water, and how we carry that through to those around us and little ones we bring into life, and our children we currently have, and everyone that we come in contact with. How it's a connector. Think about that for just a moment. It's a conductor. And when you touch somebody's hand or you give somebody a hug, your cells are water, their cells are water, and your skin touches. And think about, we've talked many times about connection you have through touch with people. Like, just think about that for a moment, that's those vibrations from your water going through their water. That picture just came into my mind, and I just thought, oh wow, that's such a neat picture of our connection as human beings with each other, and just the importance of recognizing what is going on there, and then really resting in it. And I thank you so much, Sophia, for just bringing this forward, and the work that you've been doing there. It's outstanding.
Thank you. It's very precious to me too. And I'm very happy to be able to speak about it, because so much of it is non-verbal. So much of the experience of it is beyond words. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Well, how can the listeners contact you if they'd like to find out more information, or do any online work with you, or come visit you in Greece?
Come visit.
Yeah, I would love to come visit.
So my work is called Aquagenesis. .gr is the website. I work online, so I have preparation programs online, of course in person. I work through people's birth material, either because you had a traumatic birth yourself, or it was traumatic giving birth. Yeah. Or if you have a baby that's kind of, showing some uncomfortable behavior postnatally. Even having a bath together, I've actually had people where, they're in their bath and we're having a session with, wearing swimming costume. Baby, that's also possible. And I run 2 podcasts. One is my own birth story, which was part of my thesis, my tenure research, which is on Spotify, Sophia's birth story. And I have a podcast called Birthing Conscious Humans. And I speak, again, that's interviews with people that work with birth material in different ways.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure and link each of those in the podcast show notes so that anybody can just go click on that and, find out more information or get in touch with you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being willing to share and just speak up about, the importance of water and of showing people how to recognize how important it is to us and hold that sacred space, which I can tell that you do so well.
Thank you. And thank you to all your listeners. I think just the fact that you're listening means that you're prepared to listen to yourself. You're already looking for something inside you, and that is to be applauded. So thank you. Thank you for listening in.
Thank you for listening. May you be encouraged and strengthened by what you've heard today. Remember, you are dearly loved by your Creator, so be who He created you to be. May you go in peace, friends. Till next time, Shalom.